Threats Northwest and the Fourth Corner put together a great event for you tonight, obviously. Besides everyone in attendance, we are broadcasting live on KGMI and streaming live on WeSpeak.com to make certain this forum gets out to as many people as possible. I'd like to remind everyone at this point that putting these forums together takes a lot of time and resources, and we hope you can support us with your donations when the bucket's passed around later in the evening. Tonight, Common Threads and the Fourth Corner bring you a variety of talent to talk about the very foundation of our government here in the United States, the current challenges to the First and Second Amendment to the Constitution. We have Glen Morgan, who writes whistleblower stories in his We the Governed blog to let the public know what government is doing when government doesn't want us to know what they're doing. We have Tim Eyman, the long-term tax fighter and initiative man, who the Attorney General of the state of Washington wants to bar from any campaign activity as the Attorney General continues to face legal proceedings against his family and himself for what seems nothing more than his views on state government and taxes. We also have Craig Terry, who is the owner of LC Sports, which sponsors big Top Gun shows. He's here to share the challenges of some of the legislation and some of his experiences in protecting the Second Amendment to the Constitution. His gun show is at the Ferndale Event Center this weekend. And finally, it's really a personal honor and privilege to have talk show host Lars and Larson with us tonight. Show in Washington, including KGMI, and in Oregon and Idaho features the First Amendment Friday segments. It will be his duty to attempt to run this show tonight. Lars is a conservative
with Eyman in it.
Conservative freedom fighter for free speech, the Second Amendment, and all our rights. His radio show each and every weekday reflects what is best about the American experience in maintaining our republic. Now let's give a Fourth Corner welcome to Lars, Larson, and our band.
It's a very nice introduction. You know, when you're sitting on a stage and somebody's introducing you, you try to, I mean, it's a combination of things. You can't look unhappy because I'm happy to be up on the stage, but you can't look too happy. Oh, they're saying nice things about me. So I was shooting for the Mike Pence. I'm sitting behind the greatest president in the 21st century. I'm sitting right next to Nancy Pelosi. And he has a look on his face for 90 minutes. Of just happy, I'm not going to react. Meanwhile, Nancy's, did you watch her? She was chewing on her dentures. I mean, she really, it looked like she was, I mean, she was like one of those people you see on the streets who's talking to the air. And I don't know what was going on with her, but she clearly had not been taught by mom and dad how to behave when you're in public on a stage. It's a real pleasure to be with you. They asked me, what do you want to talk about? I said, I'll talk about anything you want to talk about. We can. And they mentioned the Second Amendment. I'm identified with the Second Amendment, along with Craig. And ordinarily, I'd be carrying a gun. I carry a gun all the time, unless I'm in a federal building or on an airplane. But what's crazy is we're talking about the Second Amendment in a gun-free zone. And I'm going to make the appeal to you. I know it's not probably the biggest issue right now. $30 car tab is a big one. Ridiculous spending on light rail is a big one. A socialist or communist. Running for president is a big one. But south of the Columbia River, when I go speak to a high school group, I can carry, and I do. And that's been true for a third of a century, and it's never caused a problem. So I would like to see that. Like you, I'm a Washington State voter. I vote. I just cast a ballot recently. My wife said, you need to help me with your ballot. And I said, in Clark County at least, Vancouver, where we live, I said, it's easy. There's one matter on the ballot, and it's a tax levy. And she said, oh, no problem. I don't need your help on that one. And I hate to have to take that attitude about it. I really do. Because if we had a well-run government, it would be like the times I walk into my boss's office at the radio station, which is our flagship station. I don't go down there looking for money very often. I don't go down there and walk in and say, I need this much for this project or this much for that project. So if you don't go very often, but when you do go, you walk in and say, I need the money, this is what it's for, and this is why that amount of money is worth it for this station. That's the way it's always been. When I worked in television and radio, if you make a good case, I want the money, here's what it's for, here's why it's worth it to you to fund this. Preferably, find a way to make more money for the radio station than you're asking them to spend. If government operated that way, I'm not saying we'd all be happy to sit down and vote for higher taxes, but it would make a lot more sense. If you said, I want $1 billion to build a bridge over the Columbia River to satisfy the biggest choke point between Canada and Mexico on Interstate 5, and I'm not going to put light rail on it, and I'm not going to make it an architectural wonder. It's just going to be a flat piece of concrete with edges on it so nobody drives into the river for $1 billion instead of light rail on it where it was $4 billion. People would say, that sounds pretty sensible. We do need a new bridge, and you'd vote for it. But government doesn't operate that way. I mean, you know that I got a leg in both states. I live in Washington, I work in Oregon, I pay taxes in both states. Pretty stupid, as somebody told me tonight. I agree, it's pretty stupid. I don't get any tax advantage by living north of the Columbia River. But in both states, and Tim will go, I'm not going to even get too much into $30 car tax because that's Tim's venue, and I don't want to steal his thunder. But the fact is, in both states, the governments that are supposed to serve you are right now, no thanks to Jay Inslee or Kate Brown, collecting record amounts of revenue. Now you'd think they'd say, we're pretty flush right now. In fact, we might even give some back. But no, they say, we got several $1 billion more from you in taxes in Washington. We're getting several $1 billion more from you in Oregon. And what's their next move? They're Democrats. Another tax. And it's in some ways it's almost comical. I mean, in some ways it's like having a teenage kid. I just gave you 50 bucks, and now you're back at me for another 50 bucks. And you understand when it's your family, when it's your children, and you understand there was a time too when you went to mom and dad and said, I know you just gave me 50, or probably back in those days, $10. I need another $10 for this or that. They love you, right? I don't love government. Not at all. Tim loves it even less. I think government is a necessary evil and it's a tool. And I don't let my tools, whether it's a gun or a skills saw or a leaf blower, I don't let my tools tell me what to do. I tell the tools what to do. And when they cease to be useful, they get donated to Habitat for Humanity or whoever wants them at that point if they still run. That's what government should do. They don't do that. And one little theme, and then I'm going to shut up because we're going to make a lot of this about question and answer. I know you want to hear from these gentlemen as well. But there is something going on in government at the national level and at the state level and even at the local level, cities and counties and such, that kind of surprises me. I'm going to turn 61 next month, and I'm old enough to remember there was an old hand reporter that I knew about 35, might even been 45 years ago. And I said to him, I said, why does the legislature just vote on this and change it? And he said, oh, what are you, crazy? The voters just voted on that 4 or 5 years ago. It would be political suicide for them to come in just 4 or 5 years later and reverse whatever it was the voters did, whether they voted for something or against something. There was a sense in government The public has told us what they want, and we have to work within that. That sense is gone. It's gone to some extent at the national level, gone even so much for the president I advocated for early on when he was still one of 14 at the point I endorsed him. I believed him before then, but I wanted to announce my endorsement at CPAC, which is now coming up in a couple of weeks, and I think we might get him in a couple of weeks. But he has the government fighting the President of the United States. And at the state level, you've got people in Olympia and Salem who are telling you, we don't care what the public thinks. And we've gotten to that point over a long period of time, whereas it slid that direction. I remember one time I was talking to a prosecutor friend of mine, and I said, because he's one of the nation's experts on the death penalty, and both he and I, he's a Democrat as a matter of fact, but a conservative Democrat, and I said, why doesn't Europe have the death penalty? And he said, I said, is the public against it? And he said, no, the public's in favor of it. Almost every European country is in favor of it. This is only an example. It applies to so many things within government. And I said, well, why don't they have it? He said, well, first of all, to be in the European Union, you have to forego the death penalty. That's one of the requirements of the EU. But secondly, the public is in favor of it. The elites, the folks in government with titles in front of their names, have decided, we don't believe in this. So, and we don't care what the public thinks. Now, this was close to 30 years ago he said that. And I said, that's outrageous. I said, can you imagine if in America, elites in government would say, we know to a certainty what the public wants, and we don't care, and we're going to do the opposite. And yet, in both states, there are plenty of examples. We were talking at the table tonight for just a minute about the various examples. Washington state citizens vote down a carbon tax, and that's what it is. Don't call it cap and trade. Don't call it greenhouse gas bill. Call it a carbon tax, because then it makes it plain to people what it is. You say cap and trade, I think people say, I don't know what that is, but whatever it is, it can't affect me. They hear the word tax, they understand it affects me. So Washington voters say no to a carbon tax. And what does Jay Inslee do? Does he say, oh, didn't know you were against it. Okay, I'm here to serve you, then I'm against it too. No, he doesn't do that. Nor does Kate Brown. Kate Brown in Oregon right now is trying to shove a 700, and here's what's amazing. Let me add one point of context. Washington state hates income taxes, and the state of Oregon hates sales taxes just as much. It's weird that we're right next to each other, and each state is diametrically opposed. Not that we love the sales tax in Washington, or that they love the income tax in Oregon. It just happens to be they're polar opposites on those two kinds of taxation. But one of the things they have insisted on is anytime some joker comes along and says, hey, tell you what, we'll add an income tax in Washington, but we promise we'll reduce these other taxes. We have been to that rodeo before, and we know how it comes out. So in that context, Kate Brown wants a $700 million energy tax, and it's a sales tax on energy. Now, you would think the state of Oregon has voted down sales taxes 9 times. Washington state residents vehemently oppose income taxes. And yet what's Olympia doing right now? They're talking about an income tax. We'll start with Seattle, and we'll get to the rest of you later. You know, that's the pitch. Like you're going to get Jeff Bezos money, or you're going to get Bill Gates money. You know, I'm sure they'll go after Paul Allen's estate, but, you know. So Oregon does the same thing as Washington. They say, we don't care what you want, what you don't want. You can literally vote down sales taxes 9 times. And what does the governor and what do the Democrats, and it is specifically a Democrat thing, say? We want a sales tax on energy. Now, you would think that would be a non-starter. The first time somebody threw that up in a group of Democrats sitting around in they're not smoke-filled rooms, because the Democrats don't smoke cigars. Well, maybe they are smoke-filled rooms. It's just a different kind of smoke. And they're sitting there in their smoke-filled rooms, and they say, hey, what kind of tax should we have now? We got every other kind of tax. We got 130 kinds we got boat taxes, we got invasive species taxes, we got vehicle licensing tax, we have gasoline and diesel taxes. What kind of tax should we have now? Let's have a sales tax. You would think somebody in that room who maybe hasn't been breathing the air too long would say, hold on a second, Oregonians hate sales taxes. And the same thing should happen in Olympia. And they say, let's have an income tax. Yeah, Washington will love that. We've got the other two kinds. We should have all the kinds of taxes here. No, but they're not listening to you, and they don't care, and they're rapidly taking on this European attitude. Look, the masses are asses. You folks don't know what you're doing. I mean, some of them are actually saying it. Adam Schiff literally said, the choice of who the next president will be cannot be left to the American voters. What? I would think 20 years ago, if you'd said that out loud as any kind of political office holder, you are dead meat at the next election. But that's not the way it's working now. And to some extent, it's on us, because we need to start screaming and yelling. And I realize I'm proud to be a voice for you on KGMI and the other 20 stations around the region. I'll tell you honestly what I actually think about something, and if my views don't happen to square with yours, that's okay. I don't mind if you don't mind, but I will always tell you what I actually think about something. But the mainstream media is not going to go to bat for you. They literally will bend the news to make the stories look different. And I've been in the business a long time. I know how you can do it. And you're never going to find somebody doing it so blatantly in a story that you can tell they're doing it. You can point to it and say, he said that. He came out and said Donald Trump's an idiot. They don't do that. What they do is they juxtapose, people are dying in a flood somewhere and Donald Trump is golfing. They don't have to say he's a bad guy. That says it by itself. And now Trump has turned around, he's doing it back to them. His team took pictures of Nancy Pelosi ripping up that speech and juxtaposed it with the Tuskegee Airman grandfather who's 100 freaking years old, and he's brought his grandson with him who wants to be an astronaut, and who couldn't love that? He brought the mom who has the 2-year-old who was born at less than the weight of one fist, you know, less than 16 ounces, and is now a happy little baby that the Democrats would have been happy to kill either before or after birth, according to the Governor Ralph Northam standard. And you know, the fact is, he turned it around. They edited together and just showed her ripping, and then they cut to, you know, the man who had beat methamphetamine addiction, all these great American stories, and she literally had the gall to complain to Facebook saying, take that down. I mean, here's a great champion of civil rights, right, Nancy Pelosi. Censor those people like the Chinese would. So, I've talked enough. It is a pleasure. I love hearing from all of you, even when we disagree. It's great to be here with you here tonight. I'm going to leave more time for other people to get up and talk. Who's up next? Is it Tim? No. You want to come up, Glen?
Whatever you want to do.
Tim?
Thank you.
How do you win such great victory in court and still lose at the same time?
It's an amazing.
I'm still paying more than $30.
Well, of course you are. You were confused when you ended up voting for them. So, is this even on? Is this on?
It worked for me.
No, you're like, you got magical powers.
Test. Tim's voice isn't working.
Very low. Well, hey, thanks very much for coming out. It feels like a family reunion, because I think it was 2 years ago, we had an event here where it was Glen, myself, and Lars. I think it was like a third of this number. It's an extraordinary turnout. One of the disadvantages that I think all of us have that the left doesn't really have to worry about is that you all like work for a living. So making time for politics is a bit more of a challenge. And I think the system has gotten really, really screwed up. We seem to have a government in the state of Washington where it's basically, we have a Seattle legislature, we have a Seattle Supreme Court, we have a Seattle governor, and it seems like it's all about what Seattle wants. And the best metaphor that I've ever been able to find to illustrate that is the $30 tabs initiative that we all voted for in November. It's a really amazing number. There's about 190,000 people in Seattle that voted no on it. They said, no, we don't want our car tabs to be $30. Nearly 1 million people outside of Seattle voted yes on it. It's a 5-to-1 ratio, and yet they ended up winning. It's so screwed up that we ended up overwhelmingly voting for the measure, yet Seattle sues the voters because they didn't like what the voters said. And on the other side, we have the Attorney General, whose supposed job is to defend what we just got through voting on, and he's sabotaging the defense of our own initiative. We have a governor who said that voters are stupid, and they just were kind of confused by the ballot measure. And we have a judge that's deciding the case that's a Jay Inslee appointee. That sounds about right. That is our government currently. It all seems to be about Seattle. And it's frustrating for a lot of us that live outside of Seattle that there seems to be that. Now, I was born and raised in Yakima. I went to Wazoo, got my business degree over there, but I really... Come on, Coos. Oh, Coos. That's exactly right. But what's really driven me over the last 20 years is my love of politics. And the thing that I love about politics is that it's dirty, it's a snake pit, it's eye gouging, there's barely any rules, and it's a really extraordinary experience getting into the gutter over issues like this one. We have so much stacked against us that if we all follow the rules, we have no chance. So we have to break the rules every once in a while in order to be able to have our voices heard. And one thing that I was extraordinarily proud of in the battle over $30 tabs is that in court, we're in a King County courthouse, and the Attorney General's office is supposedly defending this initiative. And the judge asked the Attorney General, what does Section 12 of Initiative 976 do? And the Attorney General said, I don't know. I don't know. I'm crawling out of my skin, sitting there watching this Attorney General tank the case. And I literally couldn't take it. So when all oral arguments are done, I'm not a party in the case, I stood up, stood next to the Attorney General's table and addressed the judge and said, Your Honor, you had some questions that you didn't get answered. These guys are blowing the defense of this initiative. I want to answer your questions right now. This judge did not like that at all. I know you feel kind of passionately about this. We all do. I'm the sponsor of the initiative. Yeah, I feel very strongly about this. But they're tanking the case. They are absolutely blowing it. He said, I know you feel strongly, but go in the hallway and express yourself out there. I said, Judge, you just told me you're going to make the decision in the back room or later this afternoon, and I don't think you're going to be in the hallway. I think it's really, really extraordinarily important that after that hearing was over with, I got in the face of the Attorney General's office and I said, you blew it. You absolutely blew it. And it is an iconic photo between me and the Attorney General getting in each other's face because I think the voters had a right to know that they had an Attorney General that was just going through the motions but actually tanking the very case that he was supposed to do. Does anybody in here believe that Bob Ferguson really wants $30 tabs to become law? Well, we're supposed to count on his integrity as an Attorney General, as a lawyer. We're supposed to count on his ethics in order to be able to do it. Ethics from the guy who has sued Trump over 50 times. This is his obsession that we have in the state of Washington, where the Attorney General's office literally has nothing better to do with his time but to go after our president on all sorts of stuff that isn't ultimately going to have a big impact on our lives. The closing point I want to make is, it is an insane situation. For the last 7 years, I've been sued by the Attorney General and by the government. And during the last 7 years, I think it's cost me and my family well over $1 million in legal expenses defending ourselves from this battle. And the lawsuit is asking me for like $2.1 million, money I will never have, but its stated purpose is to make sure that I'm prohibited for the rest of my life from being politically active in the state of Washington. I have yet to be in front of a crowd that really believes it, and so I want to say it again. The Attorney General's office, in their lawsuit, said that Tim Eyman is prohibited for the rest of his life from being politically active in the state of Washington. I've been doing initiatives for like 20 years. I'm a pretty young guy, 54. I've got at least 20, 30 years left in me. And the idea that for 30 years I don't have a First Amendment is a really disturbing thing. And the attack on the First Amendment is just as offensive as any attack on the Second Amendment. These are rights that were supposed to be guaranteed. Guaranteed, meaning that it doesn't matter who's in office, we should be able to count on these rights, and it doesn't matter who you vote for. But unfortunately, we live in the state of Washington where it actually matters who you vote for on whether or not you have the guaranteed rights under the Constitution and whether or not you don't. So it is a scary, scary time where the Democrats do not seem to be even remotely concerned about basic constitutional rights. And on the other side, we have good, law-abiding folks like yourself who are just sitting back and saying, I don't know what is happening to the state of Washington. So it's a scary time, but I really think, and I'm always optimistic, that we got nowhere to go but up at this point.
All right, thank you, Lars. It's always hard to go up on stage and talk after Tim speaks. So for those of you, my name is Glen. I have a website called We the Governed, and I'm also the executive director of the Citizens Alliance for Property Rights. But I do find that most of what I do is focus on exposing the corruption and incompetence, which go hand in hand. Oftentimes corruption hides behind a veneer of incompetence of government throughout Washington state. And I post a lot of videos and articles. If you haven't seen We the Governed before, I'd encourage you to go there, wethegoverned.com. And a government exists by the consent of the governed. And we are the governed, and we need to start acting like it and getting involved and getting engaged so that we're more like we the people. Because right now, the way they treat us, the attitude of government is that we're the servants of government and that we need to just take whatever they shovel our way. A lot of times, one of the arguments that's been made is that we're in a fight between Republicans and Democrats, and that the two-party system is where the big battle goes into play. And this is probably a heavy Republican room here, I would assume. And that is not the real fight. The biggest party in Olympia that we have to fight is the party of bureaucracy, with a big bloated B, because they don't care who's in charge. And you see, when Trump gets elected, they just try to undermine him. And if you think that doesn't happen on a local level, I'm afraid you're deceiving yourself. It happens all the time. And I think the way I've started to feel over the years now is that when I look at bureaucracy, anytime 3 or more are gathered, there is a problem. All you have to do is find it. And so it's really worth looking at it and looking deep. But again, the future belongs to those who show up. And I want to encourage everybody in this room to look around. There's a few people that decide to show up today. And it is a lot of people. I told Charlie I forgot to print out some forms I was going to hand out, but it wouldn't have mattered. It would have been nowhere near enough. Anyway, so I guess I saved my printer. But it is, just to hand out some information here. But the future belongs to those who show up. And a lot of the reason why we find that we're discouraged or not happy with maybe the way government's going, with the clown show in Olympia, with the governor as bad as he is. And many times, look at your Bellingham City Council. I mean, there's all kinds of things that are not going the way that rational and normal people would say that that's how I expect government to work. But it's largely because we haven't shown up. If you look around this room, believe me, it only takes a teeny fraction of the number of people that are here to completely change the way government's going in where you live, with your city council, or with the county, or with the state. I mean, many times when I've been involved with local activists, we've been able to make radical changes really significant, big impacts with less than just 6 or 7 people really heavily engaged. And yet what's happened is most of us want to go about our lives, like Tim mentioned. Most of us have work for a living, which makes us substantially different than the other side. And who we're mostly funding right now. But if you don't like those homeless camps expanding, and well, you're being harassed by code enforcement because you can't build a porch in your backyard, or because you can't put a well on your property, or because you're within 200 feet of the stream, and yet when I go down to the homeless camps, I'm watching them use the salmon stream as their waste disposal vehicle. And not a word from the Department of Ecology, not a word from the environmental groups, right? They've come after and harassed us for years, claiming that that's what they cared about. And yet, when you point out literally hundreds of camps right along, I mean, there's right in the shadow of Olympia. I went and did video work on some homeless camps in Olympia, right in the shadow of the Capitol. This isn't hard. Even Inslee, as bad as he is, he could just walk out his door and he can run into him, right? Just walk a little ways away, walk around the lake, and you'll see these homeless camps, which is really garbage piles, just all along Percival Creek, a salmon stream. And there was a salmon run that was going up to the garbage, and the homeless camp folk, the drug addicts there and stuff, realized they could spear the salmon. And so they were having a good old time spearing the salmon, and so the Fish and Wildlife came by. And they realized that it was pointless to give them tickets because they weren't going to pay the tickets. And so Fish and Wildlife decided that there was a no-go zone now. They weren't even going to bother to go down and issue tickets to homeless and drug addicts that were spearing salmon and dumping garbage in Percival Creek. And it was so dangerous to go down and take photos. I had like 2 armed people that watched my back while I was taking photos of this whole, it was just this whole ravine just filled with camps and garbage. And Olympia refuses to do anything. The state refuses to do anything. And yet, look at the resources they will dedicate to come after people in this county. I mean, I've done stories up here in San Juan County where your planning department has dedicated it's the most important thing for them to make sure that the Cross family's horse dies because of the potential to pollute the creek 300 yards away. You know, it's important for them to fill in that pond that somebody made on their property because, by God, you're going to destroy the aquifer. And yet they refuse to deal with massive, genuine environmental stuff. You know, talk about leaving a trace. I mean, it's just like, it's a big garbage pile. Just leave a garbage pile behind you. And that's the priorities, unfortunately, that we're dealing with today. It's not equal treatment. And the reason is it's mostly money. The homeless camps, the drug programs, the drugs that they use, the needles they're throwing everywhere, justify large grants. How many of you have heard of some of the homeless taxes they want to impose in your county and your city? If you haven't yet, believe me, it's coming. I mean, even in Jefferson County, Clark, every county in the state, so they're going to start using that as a reason. Don't you want to clean up these camps down there? And yet, every time you give them more money, it's only going to get worse because that's how they use those problems to perpetuate the issue. We've got to stop this, and we can. And it's not common. It's not normal. Nobody's going to walk by the homeless camp there, and you're going to think, oh, I'm really happy. I'm very proud of this city. That's you know, let's get a photo there. I mean, everybody's taking photos, but it's not because they want a selfie with it, right? They're just taking photos of how ugly and nasty it is. You know, look at how bad Seattle's dying. But it can be stopped. But we have to engage. We have to be involved, and you can make a big difference. You really can. The worst thing that they're worried about is exposure. And unfortunately, your local media isn't doing it. I just did an article a couple weeks ago about ghost classes and ghost credits at Western Washington University. So apparently you can just get, they'll just throw on a few extra credits to make sure you can, you don't even have to go to a class, right? And it was just about getting student loans. And this came out of an internal audit. This isn't Glen Morgan making this up. This was a 96-page internal audit report that they did. And it was kind of buried. It never went anywhere, other than they fired the auditor after it came out. The second one, by the way. And it was given to the Bellingham Herald, and the Bellingham Herald refused to run it. It was given to the other newspapers as well, and they all refused to cover it. And I was the first person to actually publish that article. I didn't make it up. It's a government document. Your taxpayer dollars paid for that, and frankly, it's probably one of the few things your taxpayer dollars actually got some value out of. And but of course, the person who published it got fired. And then the university lobbied to eliminate the need, they lobbied the state so that they didn't have to have an internal audit department anymore. And the day after my article ran, the state officially, very quietly, eliminated the need for Western Washington University to have an audit department anymore, an internal audit. It is kind of funny. I don't know. It's just, this is how bureaucracy works, and we have to stop it. It's up to us. It isn't. Don't assume somebody else is doing it. The Bellingham Herald isn't covering the truth. They're covering it up, maybe, but they're certainly not covering it. You can't rely on some of the traditional vehicles out there. It's up to us to do it. We the people. And we're acting like we the governed right now, but it's we the people. We have to get involved, we have to be engaged, and you can make a huge difference. And again, just a fraction of the number of people in this room being engaged and involved. Pick your passion. Believe me, they'll hate it. Go to those meetings, start paying attention to what's going on, expose the truth, and you can make a huge difference where you live. Huge difference. Unbelievable. In Whatcom County, in Bellingham, if for some reason, by miracle, happens and you actually love your local government and they're doing a great job, go to your neighbors and help them. You know, there's an unlimited supply of problems. But we can make a big difference. I feel a huge change going on across the state. I've been doing this for 10 years now. And I go to communities all over the state. I've been in Whatcom a lot, San Juan County. It doesn't matter whether you're in Nesoton County, Spokane, Clark, King, downtown Seattle. There's an awakening going on of people who are pretty annoyed. That's a pretty weak word. They're really pissed off at what they see going on in their communities. Even in Seattle, they look at that as not what they want to see. And what we have to do is recognize that. They want us to be divided, they want us to not know what's happening. So exposing the truth, I think, is going to make a big difference. That's what I try to do, but it's not about me, it's not about my website. It's about getting all of us to be involved and recognizing that the future belongs to those who show up, and if we show up, we can make a difference. So anyway, we can talk more about that while we're here, but with that, thank you guys for coming. It's a great turnout here.
You have the mic right here. Save your need.
Thanks for letting me speak tonight. As Washington's largest firearms dealer, we have sold tens of thousands of firearms, and accordingly, we get the camera and microphones put in our face all the time. As a general rule, we do not comment. Our words are distorted or used selectively, and they're just not our friends. However, about 5 years ago, we had a senator, who I will not name, go on the evening news 2 nights in a row and blatantly lie about the status of firearms laws in our state. After the second night, I couldn't take it any longer. I had a large Metro TV station just pop in, put the camera in front of me, and I let loose. 2 days later, I had a team of auditors on the door. Now, certainly my tab is nowhere near Tim's, but I'm aware of the penalty for speaking out. So when I was asked to speak, at first I was a little bit concerned. Then it occurred to me that I need to speak for my customers, people that don't have a microphone put in their face all the time. I need to speak for all the small gun dealers. In general, we're facing a problem of lack of knowledge and lack of awareness, especially as it pertains to Second Amendment and gun issues. There's little or no knowledge of what the laws really are, what the issues that are being debated right now. And lastly, there's a sore misconception of what the typical gun owner is like. This problem, as Lars very astutely noted, has been exacerbated by deceptive, one-sided media. They selectively choose their material, what they will publish, what they won't publish. Did anyone see the Super Bowl this couple weeks ago? Did anyone see Bloomberg's ad? For those who didn't, this is an example of deceptive media portraying our Second Amendment issues as inherently wrong and those that must be abolished. They presented a grieving mother with pictures of a young child crying because she lost her child to a gunshot. Unfortunately, they did not tell the rest of the story. When this young man, yes, he was 20 when he was shot. He was not a baby. He was a member of a gang, and he was in the middle of a drug transaction with another gang. And by the way, the firearm used was illegal and was stolen. Yet the final embarrassment and humility of this whole thing was that none of Bloomberg's proposed law changes would have affected this incident. So the media is using false, deceptive, and emotionally charged advertising. Basically, we have a half dozen billionaires that are trying to set the agenda, set the social tone, and deprive us of our constitutional rights. Our current laws, just for those to keep you up to breast, in December of 2014, 594 was implemented, which provides for private party background checks for everyone. So now every firearms transaction from a dealer, from an individual, has a background check before transfer. In 2016, we had the first of the ill-intended red flag seizure laws. In July of 2019, we have the most contentious law of all, 1694, which, among many things, it defines what an assault rifle is. It provides for local law enforcement background checks instead of a NICS check. It provides for 10-day business wait, additional fees, arbitrary training, and unenforceable safe storage. 1694, unfortunately, was a direct result of billionaire funding an initiative signature drive gathering. These individuals, and we spoke with two who don't mind me sharing their information, but their identity will remain anonymous, were paid $9 apiece for each signature that they obtained. These signatures were obtained under false pretenses. People probably saw the signature tables in front of Walmarts and other high traffic areas where they were portraying them as $30 card tab signatures or no grocery tag signatures. The bill itself, when it finally went on the ballot, was named school safety. There is nothing in the law that pertains to schools or safety. What's going on now in Olympia? Some serious stuff. Right now, they are actively working on banning semi-automatic rifles, the sales of them. Magazine limits of 10 rounds. Background checks on ammo, waiting periods for ammo, taxes and fees for ammo. Training for CPL holders. They're wanting to change and centralize the background check processing by the Washington State Patrol, which will dramatically increase the errors and the cost to citizens. This is what we're facing right now. Instead of attention being given to far more pressing issues that are important to us as citizens, we're playing with our Second Amendment rights in Olympia. I'm going to digress briefly and talk about who gun owners are. They're all of us. They cross all political spectrums. They have all ages, all walks of life, all income. But what do we know about them? They've all passed a background check. When you walk into your local store, can you say this person, that person has passed a background check? No. Gun owners have. They've submitted their fingerprints on file so that if they've committed a crime or commit a crime in the future, they can be apprehended. They have not committed any felonies. They have no violent misdemeanors. They don't abuse drugs and alcohol. And lastly, they're not under education for mental health issues. Big deal. Statistically, gun owners are the most law-abiding segment of the population. So what do I hear from my customers? Well, they're afraid. They have extreme frustration. They think that their votes don't count. Regardless of how we vote, somehow it will be manipulated not in our favor. They think that there's two sets of laws, one for the powerful and one for the rest of us. That we, if we do something wrong, will be prosecuted. Others, if they are wealthy or powerful, don't. A universal theme is that King County controls the elections. I've probably heard that about 10,000 times. My customers are feeling threatened by the state, that with a stroke of a pen, they can go from law-abiding to becoming criminals simply for owning a firearm. Also universal Customers aren't dummies. The public is not a dummy. They realize that none of these proposed laws will make the country any safer. They will not result in a reduction of gun homicides. And customers in general feel fearful with crime increasing, with lack of prosecution, lack of enforcement, slow police presence, that they're more vulnerable than ever to crime, whether it's home invasion or being accosted on the street or in the parking lot. They feel that law enforcement is not always there to help. They feel that they're being taxed into poverty. Big theme. For the first time in generations, they feel that their children will not do better than their parents. They feel helpless to make changes. And the number one that I hear, they're going to move to Idaho. And to that I say, bye. Those of us that want to stay need to make changes. A quick discussion of facts and figures, and I don't want to bore you because facts can be manipulated, exaggerated, and outright lied about. But the bottom line in the analysis that is the result of billions of dollars in studies that have been paid for by our tax dollars is that guns save lives. There's over 2 million defensive gun uses every year by legal gun owners. 2 million. Consistently in the parts of the country, the cities, towns, states, when firearm ownership goes up, crime goes down. When gun control is instituted, crime goes up. This is not an aberration. This is true everywhere. And it's no secret to any of us. There are 5 times as many people killed every year with knives as with rifles. As a matter of fact, more people are killed with hammers than rifles. The statistics are absolutely overwhelming. Oh, and this one tidbit is always good to start an argument. The people who are advocating for gun control don't want their firearms taken away, just ours. Those that are interested in a detailed assemblage of all manner of firearms, facts, and figures from all the credible sources, whether it's FBI, the Center for Disease Control, the Department of Justice, the National Institute of Health, the Washington2A.org has a 400-page download available that has been meticulously researched and thoroughly cross-indexed. They printed these and passed them out to all the politicians in Olympia that would take them. Unfortunately, no one from one particular political party would accept one. The majority on the other did, and it allowed them to research actual facts and figures pertaining to firearms. What's my take on the issue? It's pretty simple. The media is hiding behind the curtain. Just like the closing scene in Wizard of the Oz, until Toto pulls the curtain back, we're looking at the great and powerful Oz, and we're told that guns are the problem. And don't pay attention over here to the opioid, the homeless, the infrastructure problems, everything else that we have going wrong with our society. Let's pay attention to the great Oz who tells us that we need to abandon our Second Amendment privileges. We have mental health problems with violent component. And one thing that's universally true is that the behavior always precedes the actual incident. With almost no exceptions, if somebody had spoken out, the majority of these mass homicides could have been prevented. And there are people in positions of responsibility that let us all down.
Prisons aren't full of conservatives.
We have sterile areas. Lars pointed this out earlier. We're in a sterile area. These sterile areas are very fertile killing zones. Criminals aren't dummies. When they have a hard target and a soft target, you know where they're going to go. We need to abolish this immediately. We have a tremendous increase in drug use and really a permissive attitude. Whether this was enhanced by the legalization of marijuana or not, we have a legitimate drug problem. We have lack of law enforcement and lack of prosecution. In my county, the main city in my county will not prosecute or even arrest for minor crimes against persons, for purse snatching, for vandalism. We have a statistically nationwide a significant rate of homicides committed by young men who are either taking or just withdrawing from antidepressants. The drug lobby is extraordinarily powerful. We very seldom see this issue brought up in mainstream media, but it is statistically significant and merits further research. Lastly, I want to talk about what are some solutions, at least from my perspective. We all, I think, agree on what the problems are and what the state of the Second Amendment is. But what are the solutions? From my perspective, the first thing, get involved. You made the first step by coming here tonight. You were the vanguard. Carry the message to your community, to your coworkers, to your family, your relatives, your in-laws, your outlaws. Talk, including talk to people with different opinions. We can disagree agreeably. And you never know, we might learn something. Get educated on the full spectrum of issues that concern you. We get so insulated in our lives. We work long and hard. We go home. We don't even go to the movie theater. We stream our video. We have a small circle of friends and coworkers. We have our media of choice. We have our social media. We're very insulated. We very seldom hear an opinion that's different from our own. Get outside. Learn something. Most importantly, we only have two ways to relieve our problems. These things didn't happen overnight, and they're not going to solve overnight. We have the voters' booth, and we have the courts. We can't immediately and directly do something about the courts, but we can show up and vote. It's not enough just to vote. I hear people all the time tell me, I voted. We need to get our neighbors to vote. We need to get the guy down the street to vote. We need to make sure the mailman votes. I'm not going to tell people how to vote. Just vote. The more people that vote, the better our country will be. We have to get involved in the governance of our communities. This last election, we had 19% turnout of registered voters statewide. These are third world numbers, people. This is embarrassing. In a state with mail-in ballots, I know it's controversial, but with mail-in ballots, with no postage required and a minimum of 6-week window to get it in, there is no excuse. Vote, make sure everyone in your orbit votes. But that's not enough. Get involved. Can you volunteer? Can you pass out flyers? Can you attend a voter registration rally? And lastly, run for office, just like Tim. For those of you in this audience that are more than capable of holding public office and making a difference in our communities, no matter your walk of life, young or old, there's older people who have a wealth of accumulated knowledge who would make outstanding politicians. And the truism, all politics is local, applies here. Get involved, run for office. We need to hold our government accountable, people. We have created a golem that is run amok, a lifeless, huge entity that is crushing us all. We have to roll back 1639. We have to create a mental health commission. We must enforce and prosecute existing laws. Criminals should not run rampant. Less billionaires provide undue influence in our voting. We need to eliminate paid signature gatherers. And I'll say it one more time because it is so important. Participate in the governance of our community. Thanks for letting me talk.
I'm supposed to run this show, but I'm going to make 3 points to you, and then I want Glen's probably going to jump all over me, but it always frustrated. I mean, I agree with what you said, and I've said for the last 25 years, run for office, and my favorite one to suggest, because it's within reach of every single person in this room, is to run for the school board. Now, if you do really well at that, you can always aspire to something higher. But in this state, about half the money in government is spent on education. So would you like to be one of the state lawmakers in Olympia who have a partial role in spending that money, but it's very divided up, and you have to deal with the governor and everything else and the courts? Or if you got on your local school board and you're one of 5 or one of 7 or one of 9, and you have your hands on a huge amount of money. That's one. Second, I like the idea, and I tell this to people, get on a school board, run for it in your community, and you become the lone conservative voice. And I don't care if you're the person who feels like I'm the only, if you're the only one up there, there's one up there. Most of the school boards are made up of rubber stamp, teachers union approved people who will sign off on a contract, and that's their entire purpose. You could be raising the issues of school security, gun-free zones, and all that. So that's within your reach. Let me suggest 2 ideas, right? Because I want to give you something practical you could do. And I don't care if you're very old or if you're very young, or maybe you're a very old person who hooks up with a very young person to do this kind of project. I got a laugh out of you about the Nancy Pelosi, ripping up the speech, juxtaposed with pictures of really fantastic stories about Americans. You say, how hard was that to do? You may not know how to do it, but I'll bet there's a 16-year-old or a 19-year-old or a 25-year-old who can say, we can knock those things out all day long. And don't say, I'm going to make a mammoth 2.5-hour documentary that if anybody will sit through it will convince them. Look how effective that was. It was so effective that the person third in line to the presidency was so angry she demanded that it be censored, and she knew it was effective. Now, could you do that with some of the problems that have already been mentioned here today? Yes, you could. And I'll tell you one of the guerrilla tactics that I like. A friend of mine, James O'Keefe, runs a group called Project Veritas. Some of you have seen James and I started talking years ago. Do you know what he started with? It was him and one other person in a car, their own car, and one camera. Now, it's grown into something much bigger than that. But what did he do? He went out, and I'm not even saying you have to do hidden, camera stuff, because that does have some legal problems, and you don't want to run into that. But imagine this, the signature gathering, where you notice somebody's gathering signatures, and it appears what people are signing is a gun control petition, but they're saying that it's no grocery tax or whatever. Do you know how effectively you could destroy that with one good video? And how do you get that video? Well, I don't know, take your phone out of your pocket, walk up, take some pictures, record some audio in public with the recording device in plain view. They'll never think anything of it. And then sit down with your 18-year-old friend who knows the internet and who knows video editing. It's not that hard. The tools that the TV stations I've worked for paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for are all on your phone right now, and they're even better than the ones we paid a lot of money for. You can edit. And when you put together that snappy little video that shows somebody gathering signatures for one thing, but lying to people about what it was for, imagine how effective that would be. Mike Bloomberg's campaign is taking a real hit this week because of a piece of video of him from 5 years ago. And actually, if you watch the video, I know, it's scary to say, I agreed with everything he said. I did. And I don't agree with Mike Bloomberg on much, but he said 95% of the homicides are committed in big cities by black Americans between 16 and 25, and they're mostly male. That's actually true. 50% of the homicides nationwide are committed by 6% of the population. Oh, look, I got black friends too, and they didn't murder anybody. But you have to identify where the problem was. That piece of video is creating real problems for his campaign, and it'll be even worse when we get to November. So if you said, I'm going to make it your hobby in retirement if you're that age. Make it your hobby because you're a kid who wants to be involved in politics. You say, I want to do what Veritas does. It's within your reach. And you can start small. Go to a city council meeting when they think nobody's covering it and record what they actually say. You'd be amazed what stupid things liberals say when they think nobody is paying attention. Now the third thing, because that's a practical thing you could do, you could start doing it tomorrow. So I'm not giving you unreachable goals, and if running for school board is something you say, well, I have to find out what the next opening is, and what's the filing date, and all that stuff. Here's the third thing, and Glen is free to tell me I'm 100% wrong. Use the tools that the government uses against him, and I almost thought he was going to go there tonight because he came that close. He said, if you go out to build a shed in your backyard, I know in Vancouver, in theory, you can only build a shed that is 12 by 10 without a permit, right? And they will come down on you like a ton of bricks if you build one that's 13 by 10. The county or the city will be happy to come by and land all over you. And then you have these pollution problems that Glen talked about and that Tim has mentioned, and you say, gosh, it's illegal to allow that kind of stuff on your property. And you think of it as if you maintained a garbage dump on your property, the city and county come by and cite you. Why don't you go down and file against the public owners of property, cities and counties in the state? Say there's a piece of state property that the state is allowing unlicensed dwellings on. I have a friend who owns some private property in a lot of private property in the Portland area. He used to get tagged by the city. And this was years ago before the homeless problem got to the size it is. They'd say you're allowing structures that are not fit for human habitation with inadequate HVAC and inadequate sanitation. They were tents set up by bums, but they tagged the property owner. Well, where are most of those homeless camps located? Most of them aren't on private property. Most of them are on government property. Well, is the government held to the same rules? Now, maybe I don't think there's any limitation on a citizen going down and saying, I'd like to file a zoning violation. Well, who against? City of Olympia, City of Seattle, County of King. Go for it and see where it goes. And if you say, well, they'll just ignore it. Yeah. Pile up a half a dozen of them, pointing out that the owner of that property, Jay Inslee, and you, is allowing pollution to go into the waters of the United States. And then once you've got a stack of complaints that have been filed with no action taken, and I know it'd take a little research on your part, but it wouldn't take much. How do I file a complaint about somebody polluting the waters of the United States? Corps of Engineers, EPA, federal agencies. We were talking before the meeting tonight about the fact that the president, now that we're past the impeachment nonsense and they're on to impeachment 2.0, which will start any day now, he's using the federal government against New York. Why? Because New York has a whole ton of rich people who fly to other countries all the time, and they love their Global Trusted Traveler program. And the feds just said, Global Trusted Traveler out of New York is shut down. Holy cow, all the rich people in New York just, had a coronary, because that means it's going to take them longer to get to their first class seat, or long to get from their first class seat to the curb and be picked up by their private car and taken to their fancy Manhattan condo. And he's just said, you're all shut down because your state has decided not to cooperate with us. You took that same technique, and tell me that one of you couldn't go down, take the homeless camp, find out whose land it's on, city, county, state, file the complaint. Pile up a bunch of complaints, show that they've taken no action, and then take it to the appropriate federal agency. Use the rules against them. Now, Glen, would it work?
I don't know if that exact would work, but I think filing complaints, I've done it before many times. Filing complaints, I think, does work because it does build up a certain pattern of behavior, and I think it is worth doing that. I also want to really repeat, anybody that bothers to go to Bellingham City Council just 3 times in a row, you will not forget it. And you can't help but discover, if you at all have any level of curiosity, or if you can do math, or if you just have a basic function of common sense, you will start to see bizarre decisions, bad, weird things that they say, choices they make, especially when you pull you start to compare what they're saying with what it's really a useful exercise. And then find what you want to dig into, and then go after it, expose it. You don't even have to go undercover. They're happy to say stupid things on camera all the time, because they don't actually think it's stupid, because they're living in their own bubble, and you'll catch them in lies, you'll catch staff in lies. They can't help themselves. And the reason why I know this is in Bellingham is because I can't find a city in Washington where it's not happening. If it's at a certain size, and you got Western next door, you're feeding, the people there that can't get employed go and work for the planning department, and so this is really what's driving the problem. We did a story a while ago about Evergreen College, and I think it's important to look at this. Once Evergreen College, there was an article in the Seattle Times that said Evergreen College, it was the former president was leaving, he said, this is really the college that people just need to know better. Well, America got to know it, and nobody wants to go there anymore. And so now their student enrollment is half of what it was a couple years ago. And it's just collapsing because it turns out there's, the diversity, intersectionality, and equity, right, agenda, which stands for DIE. And it is. It's where reason and freedom and independent thought goes to die. Your local college. And Evergreen College, and we're paying for it. And I'll tell you, the best thing that's ever happened to me as an activist in Thurston County is to watch Evergreen College go where it should go, which is away. And after the third or fourth staff layoff, it's been really a nice change in the environment. I can really feel it improving in Thurston County. And sometimes it's just a matter of exposing the truth. It doesn't get a lot more complex than that. It's going and taking photos of those homeless camps. Don't just complain about them, document them. That's actually what's really making an impact in Seattle and Olympia and Vancouver, is going around and taking video and pictures of exactly what compassion has brought us. Because there's nothing compassionate about what we're seeing. There's nothing environmentally normal. There's no sane person thinks that's a good idea, other than your Bellingham City Council and some Western professors, apparently.
But Glenn, take pictures of everything.
Everything.
And then you have to be a good editor. Pick the one that matters. I'll give you one example.
Yeah.
Glenn could have done the story. This happened in Oregon, but it applies just as well. Kate Brown getting out of a twin-engine aircraft. And somebody snapped it and sent it to me, said, hey, why is the governor of Oregon, Climate Kate as we call her, because she wants the $700 million in carbon taxes to save the planet, why is she flying 180 miles to Central Oregon to give a 45-minute speech and then flying back? Why? Because she can. But it became, we did the story, Willamette Week did the story, the Oregonian did the story, it got national attention. They said, here's a climate championing governor who gets in a plane, and instead of driving, it's not that bad, it's actually a very nice drive, 2.5 hours, she flies. And why? Because one of her wealthy donors offered her the flight. The issue isn't the money, the issue is, here's somebody who's telling you don't burn gas, who's burning a lot of gas to fly somewhere, because when you're an elite, that's how you travel. It's how Leonardo DiCaprio and the rest of these jokers travel around to give lectures, and it's how Bernie Sanders spent $1 million on private jet travel last year. Now, was the money obtained legally? Yes. It's not the money. It's why is the guy who's running around telling you need a 50 trillion, whatever, the number is so big you can't imagine it, Green New Deal, when he flies around on private jets. Why? Because he's important. He's a communist. He's the communist. But go ahead, Tim.
We were talking about things that we can do. And one of the things that really struck me when we ended up doing our $30 tabs initiative, and the thing passes, and we're all assuming that it passes, so therefore it's the law, and they put it on hold because they said we were confused. And I said, I am not renewing my car tabs. This is basic civil disobedience. This is peaceful protest. And I made it very clear to people that you have to accept the consequences on it, but do the math. We are dealing with millions of vehicles in the state of Washington. I've been driving since October with expired tabs. My car tabs are 0.
I take it you haven't been pulled over yet. Tell them what you told me on the radio you would do if an officer pulled you over. That he would explain to the officer, much as somebody burning a flag in downtown Seattle would explain, I am engaging in expression by not buying tabs as a political protest. And he suggested that since I imagine, well, there aren't a lot of conservatives in prison, I don't really think there are a lot of liberals who are Washington State Patrol officers. There might be some. But I'll bet most of them are pretty reasonably conservative, and I don't know if you've had the chance to use that.
Well, what's really kind of neat is that I made it very clear exactly how it works, is that the likelihood of ever getting pulled over is really, really small. But if you are pulled over, and I've had family members pulled over and have done exactly what Dad told him to do, twice, and that is that, officer, I'm more than happy to pay $30, but not a penny more. I was not confused. I knew exactly what I was voting on, and if my government is not going to respect my vote, why should I respect them and follow a law that the voters have clearly said they're not in favor of? But I think I wanted to go one step further. And he's talking about school board and stuff like that. We're going for the top job here. Jay Inslee made it a pretty easy decision for me to run for governor because he set the bar so darn low that I really thought at the end of the day, 4 more years of Jay Inslee. 4 more years of Jay Inslee. As a candidate, when he was running for office, he said he would veto any tax increase. Said no tax increases if you elect me. Over the last 8 years, he has raised taxes 29 times, costing us $50 billion. Over the last 20 years, with our initiatives, we've gotten 17 initiatives on the ballot. The voters have approved 11 of them, and they've saved the taxpayers $43 billion. The thing that was so fantastic about the election last year, and Glen has just done a masterful job writing about it at We the Governed, is that all of last year they spent $5 million trying to convince everybody to vote no on Tim Eyman's $30 tabs initiative. It was all about me. And the voters said, we don't care about him, we like his ideas though. And they ended up voting overwhelmingly for the initiative. And what is galling to me is to hear a governor, a guy who lied to us, and has lied to us 29 times raising taxes, said we were all confused by this very, very confusing ballot measure. A measure that was about a dollar amount. It's, you know, it's not 31, it's not 29, it's like that one in the middle. And the governor is this kind of person that has set the bar that low. And by the way, he really doesn't even want to be governor. He wanted to be president. He spends $5 million to learn that 0% of the people in his own party want him to be president. And he came with his tail between his legs back to Washington State, and he said, I'll settle. I'll have a consolation prize. Why don't I just go ahead and get a 3rd term? I think it's really important for us. It is very important to vote. It's very important to do ballot measures. But I really believe that fundamentally, at the top of the ticket, we have got arrogant elected officials that we've absolutely got to get out of there, because no matter how many initiatives we pass, if we elect people that aren't willing to listen to us, then we're all kind of screwed.
It's well known that most conservatives are peace-loving, pretty passive, law-abiding people. As a matter of fact, I'm sure most of you would agree with me, is all we need is a 6-pack recliner and a big screen and we're good. There is, however, the straw that broke the camel's back. And we all know that our country is rampant with corruption, with wrongdoing. It's not so much us versus them, but a matter of us participating. Too often it's too easy for us to say, well, someone else will take care of it, or he'll take care of it, or that's the police's job. In my line of work, the majority of the Second Amendment work is being done by individual citizens, not by the NRA, not by the Second Amendment Foundation, who gladly take your money, and perhaps their focus is on national issues. But in the state, the work is being done by individual citizens who are sacrificing their time off the job, they're spending their money out of the pocket, and they're going to Olympian testify. I'd like to give a shout out to a few people that are particularly involved in this. Washington2A.org, Melissa Denny, Denny G, George Kelly, Marty Hayes, and Gila Hayes of the Firearms Academy of Seattle are just a few of hundreds of individual citizens who have taken upon themselves to get involved. We all have the same question. What can I do? How can I make a difference? We collectively can awaken as a sleeping giant and change the destiny of our country by getting involved. It can be something as simple as making a contribution to a political campaign, volunteering for a political campaign, taking some of Lars's ideas and broadcasting and fighting corruption that we see in our everyday lives. But it's up to us. We have to get involved individually. We can't count on someone else.
No, go ahead.
And I just want to add, 2 years ago, Tim and I did this tour where we called it the Full Contact Activism Tour. And we just went around the state. We started in Whatcom County and we went around, and partway through the tour, we were trying to inspire more people to become activists. And Tim and I started talking to each other, and we realized, we get up there and we just say, Tim's explaining, the AG's throwing the entire weight of the state government against him. I've been sued 5 times, right? And we started, death threats and all that. And then we realized that probably wasn't actually inspiring too many people to join in. So, right. But the thing to remember about that is that there's only a few people actually out there doing that kind of stuff. And so the state feels quite empowered to go after a couple of individuals. And they don't have too much trouble doing that. But honestly, if 1/10 of this room was doing it, there actually aren't enough attorneys in the AG's office to go after everybody. And I think that's a bit of a revelation for most people to realize, because I don't think it's easy. You look around in this room, but I've been in a lot of places around the state, just even in the last year, groups of people, 10 people here, 50 people there, 40 there, that all we have to do is become sort of partially engaged a little bit more and active, and it makes a huge impact. And the other side they don't actually have the resources to stop us. They cannot stop us, but you do have to show up. You do have to engage, and you can't stop the minute there's a minor setback. This is a long game. I'm 5th generation Washingtonian. My kids, are 6th generation. We're not going away. I'm not going to Idaho. But I want to bring a little piece of Idaho here, right? Which starts by removing some of the crazies that we've allowed to get into government, whether that's in the bureaucrats or the politicians. And they won't go away if we ask them nicely. So we have to actually get engaged and involved, and you can do that nice too, but they've never really appreciated that too much from me. But imagine if there were a lot more people. I have, as a hobby, I filed 585 Public Disclosure Commission complaints against our friends on the other side around the state, and I did it when they filed one on me, and I thought that was a proportional response. And so far it's produced 585,000 fines. Right, across the state, 60 different politicians and political groups, and that included the Speaker of the House, the former Director of Ecology, all kinds of my friends. And they took my name off their Christmas card list, right? I'm not they're not happy with me. And in fact, they changed the law because of it. They passed a law, they call it the Stop Glen Morgan Bill. But that's funny, right? I thought it was funny. That's just one person getting engaged and pushing in one little area to cause that much of a ruckus and chaos, and it was good. I do it now habitually. Last night I filed one on the insurance commissioner, just for fun, and then Kashama Sawant yesterday, or 2 days ago. So, and they get to experience the joys and wonder of Washington State's laws, just like the rest of us now. And they all thought they were untouchable. And so I think that we have to remember, all we have to do, find your passion. Don't imitate exactly what I do or what Tim does, or, you know, each of us has our own skill set, our own interests, where we live, where there's something we care about that we want to be focused on. And I promise you there's a couple other people that share that passion. And when you get together, whatever that is, focus on it. If it's Second Amendment issues, that's fine. If it's your local school board, that's great. If it's teaching just the fundamentals of math to your Bellingham City Council, it could just be as simple as that. But there's all kinds of opportunities, and it doesn't have to be, it can be fun. You know, I mean, there's a lot of fun things. I mean, fun for you, right? It won't be so much fun for them, maybe. But I mean, you can really have a lot of fun with this. But more importantly, focus on the long game, which is getting back control of our government, shrinking the sizes of this insane state that we've allowed to get entirely out of control, get them out of our pocketbooks and our freedom, and get back to living our own lives. But it requires us to be diligent on it, but we can do it. There's a lot of opportunities here.
You know, one of the things I'd like to suggest to you is it was either Tim or Glen mentioned, listen to the other side. Now, I do it because it's good practice. You hear an argument, you say, how would I meet that argument? But how many of you ever heard the phrase, some people did something? You know what? Okay, now you all know it, right? It was at a speech she gave to a Muslim group that I guarantee you, I can just about guarantee, nobody in this room would have gone to if it was being held in downtown Bellingham. But to some extent, you're going to have to get outside your comfort zone. And like Glen said, I find it fun to go after these things. And just understand you're not going to get a win every day. For those of us who put fun things on the air, you know, there are occasional wins where you really get a good one, like, you know, like Ilhan Omar standing up and describing the death of the murder of almost 3,000 people as some people did something, describing this terrorist attack in America. But it was a gem that only came about because somebody went to that and saw her say that and said, that's outrageous, and then it percolated out. And you have more capability if you think, well, if I do all this, how's it going to show up? I'll put it on my Facebook page. No, you can send it to me, and if you do put it on your Facebook page or Twitter, and it is that pointed, if it's that pointed a kind of thing, you go to the Bellingham City Council, and you're watching them, and somebody, again, they say stupid things when they think nobody's paying attention. We can push this one on the voters, they'll vote for anything. And you take that piece of audio and that piece of video, and you slap it on Twitter, it will go viral. I mean, and that's part of what the modern media environment is all about, is you don't just have to send it to me, although I'm not going to complain if you do, and I'll probably use it. But what you can do is you can throw it out there to the big world of the internet, social media, and a lot of times it'll take off under its own power, and it'll be amazing. I mean, I had a dispute almost 2 years ago now. I'm actually going down to the U of O next week, and I'm going to do the show from campus, which is kind of amazing. I will be able to be on campus because the laws are different in Oregon. 2 years ago, a bunch of conservative kids at BSU said, hey Lars, will you come and speak to our group? And I said, heck, I'll come and do the show from the campus. They said, okay, they had it all set up. Then they went to the administration, and the administration threatened them, fortunately for me, in writing, and said, we will call you up before a disciplinary committee. We may kick you out of school for merely inviting this person to campus. That's what they did. So at the end of the day, I was not going to put their futures at risk. My future's pretty well set. Theirs isn't. They're 19 and 20 and 21. So I thought, well, what can we do? I know what I'll do. I'll go up, armed, concealed carry, legal, and all that. Went up to the Memorial Union on campus, and I did a Facebook Live. Right now, most of my Facebook Lives get 15 or 20,000 hits. This one got 500,000. Not because of my face for radio, but because people thought, and all I did was describe. I was invited by these students. They wanted to hear what I had to say. The college said, do not invite him. We will throw you out of school. It will cost you money. It will cost your education. You may have to go to a different college. I mean, real threats for 19 and 20-year-olds. All I did was describe it. Standing there in the student union, telling them where I was. They said, I'm armed on campus right now. It's totally legal. 500,000 hits. Now see, you could do that too. Facebook Live, as much as I don't like Zuckerberg, I'm happy, just like I don't like government agencies in a lot of what they do, but if you could use their tools against them, that's one way to get that message out and to show their hypocrisy. And if you start going to speeches you'd never think of going to, some radical comes in and wants to sing Bernie Sanders praises, go listen to the speech. And if you want to, take the phone like mine and get yourself a little patch cord at Best Buy or Radio Shack or whatever, and but jack into their audio system so it's nice, clean, crisp audio. And then when they say some people did something, or take the black and Latino 16-year-olds and throw them up against the wall, like Bloomberg said, you will have nice, crisp audio, and it will really sound good on Twitter, and you will get stuff that will take off. Don't expect to get a win every week or every month or even every year, but those things add up over time. Tim?
I just want to take 90 seconds because I got distracted. Not renewing your car tabs, I think, is a really extraordinarily positive thing, and it's something I encourage everybody to do. And I think it's really important to remember what exactly we're talking about here, is that if you do not renew your tabs, it's not a crime, it's not any kind of civil penalty, it's literally like a parking ticket. So the likelihood of getting pulled over is extremely small. But let's say you do get pulled over. You very respectfully tell the officer, I'm not cheap, I'm not overly frugal, I'm willing to pay $30, I'm not willing to pay more than $30 because we made a decision on that. What we found, and I had it multiple times in my family, the officer says, I respect your decision, I'm going to allow you to go forward and give you a warning. If for whatever reason, and I have yet to find of a situation where a law enforcement person actually gave you a ticket, you do not pay it, you simply appeal it. I think we should pack our traffic courts with patriotic citizens who are refusing to accept a government that's saying that we were all confused. We even have a Seattle judge ruled yesterday that our initiative was constitutional, which means that we should all have $30 tabs today, yet it's being kept on hold. Why would we pay our car tabs when we have a constitutional law that we voted for, and yet the system is holding it back? I don't think it's asking that much of citizens to do that. I'm already taking that risk myself since October. I'm driving all over the state, little date right on there, October 2019. But I think we have to find anything that we can do to not just accept it when the government does this. In my view, they are the ones who are the lawbreakers. We are not.
And I just want to point out, organizing is not that difficult. It's 5 people meeting in a coffee shop once a week, right? Just deciding that you want to get together and you're going to focus on something. And it doesn't mean you need to start an organization, set up a bank account, nothing like that. You just get together and you decide, what's my target, right? And it's a target-rich environment. And there's tons of opportunities out there. And if you like videoing, I mean, there's a reason why I bring this around with me to all public meetings. And I go to King County all the time and take photos of all the politicians and senior bureaucrats that I can. My main reason is I like to write articles about them, and it's good if I have photos that aren't copyrighted, and a good zoom lens gives me a nice quality photo. And they're actually quite nervous when people take photos of them. But I think it's worthwhile to do this kind of thing. So somebody should do that where you live. Document who these people are, what they're doing. And then if you're good at accounting, that means you probably don't work for the government right now. And get their books. If anybody's ever looked at the financial documents associated with your county or your city, even your school district, go through specifically all the expenditures and start questioning what they're spending money on. Once you figure out what it is, it's not easy.
Hey Glenn, you want a fun one you can do? Wait about 2 weeks, because Valentine's Day is tomorrow. Do you know what you do? I do this every couple of years, and they fall for it every time. You go down to the Bellingham City Council, to the auditor or business office, whatever it's called. You say, I would like a copy of all the city-issued Visa cards that are handed out to the city council members and the mayor, and I want to see the bill for February. And you know what you often find, and I mean often find, is expenditures on Valentine's Day on city-issued credit cards. You want to really give them a hard time? I mean, it seems like, well, I mean, at the end of the day, he or she bought $30 worth of, or $50 worth of flowers for their significant other. but it tells people their attitude about how money gets spent. There was a significant blow up this week, Oregon in this case. Jennifer Williamson, odds-on favorite to be running for governor in probably 6 or 8 years, running for Secretary of State, odds-on favorite to win it, Democrat of course, and she got blown up because over the last couple of years, she and her husband, who works for a high-dollar law firm, makes about $250,000 a year, had been traveling to Ireland, and, a lot of foreign travel and everything else on her campaign money. Now, believe it or not, in the state, not illegal, just wrong. And the thing is, that story was about to pop on Wednesday, and they, of course, called her, say, we're about to publish a story. You always do this with somebody you're going to do a critical story on. We'd like your comment, which a lot of times it makes my workload easier. They say, no comment. Great, that was easy. And it blew up her political career. So that's a major league Democrat who is now not in public, well, she'll serve out the rest of her term as a state rep. She won't be Secretary of State. She almost guaranteed won't be governor. Taken out by a 4-week investigation, and all it took was for a reporter, I know the guy, to go down and say, I'd like to see the contributions and expenditures reports, and starts looking through them. Probably somebody tipped him, I don't know for sure, but they might have said, you ought to take a look at her C&Es, looks at him and says, wow, last year, the first 6 months of last year, she spent $10,000 on dinners and drinks. In $1,500, I don't spend $1,500 a month on dinner and drinks. And that would have been my money. She was spending campaign money. She was buying this and that. Oh, and they also found out while they were looking at it, most lawmakers who don't live in Olympia have to rent a place in Olympia. She rented a bedroom from her niece, which meant she got to take campaign money and put it in her niece's pocket. She rented another office from her husband, the lawyer. And so she got to take campaign money and put, that's called money laundering. Now, again, not illegal. Nobody's been able to identify a crime, but it blew up a major Democrat figure who has already done a lot of damage, and I could tell you about those, and would have been doing a lot more damage, and she's gone from the political scene by one story from one reporter who just looked at the C&Es, and the whole time she was spending all this money, traveling to all these exotic places, staying in nice hotels, traveled all over the United States. I mean, a state lawmaker going to Nashville, going to Hawaii, going to Miami, and you say, what does that have to do with you running for office or anything like that? They just had to look at the records, and the records are sitting right there just waiting for someone like Glen or like Tim to look at. And it blew up a major Democrat. Yeah, exactly. Well, Biden launders it through the rest of his family. Blue-collar Joe doesn't touch that dough. That goes to Hunter or James or the wife or somebody else. And by the way, just in case you're wondering, my wife and I are very careful. I've told people this. I said, somebody thought they couldn't curry favor this way, but if they said, we need to get Lars on our side, why don't we hire Mrs. Larson for a board position? Or why don't we hire her for a project of one kind or another? We'll put some money in her pocket. I mean, I hate to say it, but there have been some Republicans who've done this kind of thing too. So I would urge you to do not do this. There was a congressman from California, Republican, who a few years ago, from a lobbyist, bought a boat, a very nice boat, about a $600,000 boat. It was really worth about $800,000. And then about a year later, sold the boat back to the same guy who'd sold it to him, a lobbyist, for about $300,000 more. It's a way to put $300,000 in somebody's pocket. Obama did that with his house, and a crook from Chicago who lived next door to him. But don't do it yourself. Keep your books clean. If it comes down to a question of whether you're going to buy dinner or the campaign's going to buy dinner, keep it clean. But start looking for it on the other side and ask for the visa bills. Find out, are there city-issued visas that are given to the mayor and city council to pay for incidental expenses, and then look for the flower orders and the dinner.
There are lots of opportunities out there. And I learned this when I was a college Republican, and I remember when I was annoyed when they had a hunger strike on campus, and trying to harass all of us, and we had a barbecue right next to it. You're limited only by your imagination and your willingness to engage and involve. It can be something different, but you find something to do that's impactful. And you can find plenty of things to do. I'm telling you, you're limited only by your imagination. And again, find your skill. If you don't like speaking at public comment, but you're a numbers person, you like crunching numbers, get a records request and just start digging through the financials. You know, we've done this before in cities, and we suddenly watch, when they know they're looking, suddenly the amount of money they're spending every year drops by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Not because even they were doing anything illegal, they just don't want to have to justify how they just spent your money. And the next year, they didn't want to have to do that. So it's amazing the impact that you can have. But you have to vote, you have to be engaged, and just get more people involved. This is a big room of people with a lot of opportunity.
Right. 2 words, legal insurrection. For those of you that are students of history, you'll probably remember that 50 years ago in East Berlin, before the wall came down, the public was living in an environment of extreme oppression, hardship, starvation. Did they do what's happening in France right now? No, we don't have to, and they didn't have to either. We don't have to pillage, plunder, we don't have to riot, burn stuff up. We can actually accomplish something successfully. Collectively, they applied the power of the majority and were able to change laws, change politicians, and change their future by working together. If they can do that, we can. They had nothing to lose. We have everything to lose. We're smarter, we're better connected with modern technology, we're better educated, and frankly, we have some sharp cookies in the conservative side of the aisle to be examples, to provide leadership, to provide inspirational stories. So, legal insurrection, look it up, it works.
Can I give you, I was just going to say real quickly, I totally agree with Craig that everybody should vote. I think all of us that believe in the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, cutting taxes, all of us vote on Tuesday this November. As far as the people that are against those things, I think they should vote on Wednesday and have them go on. And so everyone participates, but I just assume more of us be voting and not the other side.
No, there are things you can do, and I really am concerned about the country. We haven't talked a lot about national politics, but I think we have a great opportunity, but it comes, like most opportunities you would do, with hazard. Because, in fact, I think somebody once said the Chinese ideogram that means opportunity also stands for hazard. We are going to see an election, I think, in all likelihood, unless the Democrats cheat Bernie for the second time and risk the millennials burning them down, which they may do. If he gets the nomination, and if I had to bet right now on the data we have right now, it won't be Biden, it won't be Warren, could be Klobuchar, might be Mayor Pete, who's a disaster in his own town. And the mainstream media has done everything they can to ignore how bad a job he did as mayor. You can't be a mayor of a small, and I've been to South Bend. It's a nice town, but if you can't be a mayor of a small town, how can you run a country? And that question's going to get asked if he ends up the front runner. But if Sanders pulls it out, then we get the contest of communist versus capitalist. We get a guy who has spent his entire life in public office. Bernie, I don't know how many of you know his history, but he comes out of a very poor family. He goes to an elite college on a scholarship in Chicago, private school. Gets a 4-year degree. You think, 4-year degree from an elite private school, that's got to send you places. Didn't send him anywhere. Tried to be a carpenter for a while, failed at that, can't build things. Got a job at the welfare office. It's really tough to give away money. So he did that for a while. Then he runs for mayor of Burlington, Vermont. He gets that. And I think there were some flukes in there that were not created by him. It was just luck of the draw. Then he runs for Congress, gets into Congress, does nothing memorable at all, then runs for the Senate. The state of Vermont is 600,000 people. It's almost exactly the same population as the city limits of Seattle. Yeah, that's all the bigger the state is. Then becomes a senator and does nothing much of anything as a senator and just collects a public, so he's been on the public dole his entire life. Whereas Donald Trump, yes, have his companies filed bankruptcy? Sure. if you go online, you can find, and it's a fun one to do when your friends bring, well, Donald Trump went bankrupt. No, he never went bankrupt. Some of his companies filed for bankruptcy. Look up the list of famous companies whose names you would recognize where they have had a bankruptcy. Apple came that close to going bankrupt, and only Jobs coming back saved them from they were ready to go bankrupt. They were right on the edge of it. Today, they're the biggest company in the world, worth all this money. But anybody who wants to badmouth folks who go bankrupt, there's a reason the bankruptcy laws are there, and you can think, well, I don't like them. But you know, America had very few companies in it, very few corporations in it, in the early days of America until they made limited liability corporations possible. It just wasn't possible to do business. So we see this contest between these two. One guy who wants to double or triple the size of the federal budget, no idea how to pay for it except borrowing or taxing, and both of them are bad, versus a capitalist who's done great things for the country. And what's really just grinding the Democrats up right now is he's winning. He's going to win a record number of the black vote in America. He is going to make Mitt Romney look like a piker by comparison, and John McCain too. He may get 30 to 35% of the black vote in America, and it's just extraordinary. And why? Because he actually delivered for them. He could say, he literally, how many of you know the phrase he used talking about black voters when he first ran? You know the phrase? What have you got to lose? You elected that other guy, he didn't do jack for you. Take a chance on me. Now, he didn't get a huge amount of black vote, but having made that offer, what have you got to lose? We now have the lowest level of black unemployment in American history, and I have a feeling this isn't even going to poll right. Because the posters are going to go to black voters, and if they're around anyone else, like, I'm voting for Bernie, or I'm voting for Pocahontas, or whoever. But in the voting booth, or at your kitchen table in Washington State, they're going, I'm voting for the guy who put a paycheck in my pocket and let me earn my dignity. And that's going to happen. You're going to have a lot of people lie to a lot of pollsters about what they're planning to do. So.
Oh, yeah, you want to go to questions? Sure. Yes. What's this? Oh, actually, no. It's not hard.
Now, I want to ask Glen, would it be a good idea to remind these folks of the benefit of participation in the grassroots caucus event taking place on February 29th?
Sure, yeah, February 29th. There's a caucus in your county too. Make sure you know where your caucus meetings are. I don't know where the locations are in Whatcom County, but they're easy to find. And we got somebody down here that does know where they are. WSRP.org. Put in your address and you will be able to find your proper caucus meeting. And listen, that's another opportunity to meet other people who see the world and who are concerned about the same things you are. A lot of people, frankly, that may not even know about tonight, they weren't here, they'll be there. That's a great opportunity to go and meet them, get involved, find some new people, and be engaged. I mean, this is an opportunity for us, and it's more than just us. I have 4 kids at home. I'm doing this for them. You know, we have to restore sanity and take back control. We let it go. We got to take back control of our local government, and you can do that.
Are there any other questions? I just stand up and shout out, yes, sir. What's your question? Not a speech, a question.
I just want to thank you, gentlemen, for your inspiring me with these nuts and bolts things we can do. And as much as I hate being robbed out of my pocketbook, I think the big issue is what Craig is talking about, the Second Amendment. Because without the Second Amendment, I'm convinced over the last 8 years before Trump, if we didn't have all these yahoos out there like me and you with weapons, we might not even be sitting here. So I think that these Second Amendment issues are not some wild, crazy NRA thing, but the survival of our democratic republic. So my question is, I'm preaching to the choir now, but what are some ideas you're talking to the
go to wa2a.org and download the 400-page material. Find a few bullet points that resonate with you, that are easy to understand, that are easy to share. It's
wa2a.org.
And they represent the Washington State Firearms Coalition. So they are the ones that are actively involved, testifying every day, bringing all kinds of people to Olympia to point out the facts. They're also presenting alternatives. It's not enough to have a problem. We need solutions.
Glenn?
I would say the other thing to do is, how many of you have friends that don't own firearms and don't believe in owning firearms? You have some. We all have some. Take them out shooting. I mean, honestly, it's... No, I mean, I remember when I was younger, before I was married, I remember everybody, when I would go on a date, right? One of the first dates was to go shooting. It was a good test. And so, and
Weed out the...
Weed out, yeah, you weed them out right away. But I never had a leftist friend of mine, or somebody who'd never been around firearms, who hated the fact they went out shooting. And once they did, that changed the way they viewed the issue. And if you want to, I mean, evangelize for the Second Amendment. Evangelize for what you believe. I mean, you believe in liberty, you evangelize for it. And at the same time, for those, this is the one weakness, I think, the Second Amendment. And I mean, listen, I've been shooting since I was 6, right? I remember I saved my paper out money to buy my first rifle when I was 12, when I couldn't buy it, my mom did. But, you know, it's something I really believe in. But what you'll find is that there is no salvageable politician out there who hates your Second Amendment. So if somebody doesn't like the Second Amendment as a politician, then take them out any way you possibly can legally, right, and exposing them. And it won't be because they hate the Second Amendment. It's going to be because they squander money. They're likely corrupt. You know, I mean, it's whatever the issue is, whatever that story is, if you focus on them, you know, you can identify the Second Amendment position as why you're coming after them, but that's not going to be what takes them out. You can give speeches all you want to them about how the Second Amendment, you know, means so much to you and it's an important freedom. They don't care. They've already shut down. But if you look at, say, I'm going to start going through your emails, and I'm going to look at your Public Disclosure Commission. I'm going to look at how you've been spending money. I'm going to look at everything related to you, and I'm going to shine this biggest spotlight in your political career you've ever had. I think you'll discourage other politicians from taking a similar position. I think that's pretty helpful.
Let me suggest something to you that it relates to what I do for a living, because on KGMI, I'm glad that they carry my show up here. But one of the biggest problems I have with callers is they'll call in, and I'll want them to make their point, whether I agree with them or not, and they have a tough time sort of crystallizing it. And it's not a bad, I mean, I hate to use the word intellectual, because that makes you think of the UW and the crazy people down there, or maybe Western Washington and the crazy people over there. But if you sat down and said, I really think we should own guns. Okay, write those bullet points out. And I know you're going to be tempted. Some people do this to me on email. They write 40 pages. Your argument is not strengthened with 40 pages. Your argument is strong when you can make 3 or 4 or 5 bullet points. You're going to want to go to 12. I do too. You want to load the wagon. I got 5 good points. I better put 5 more in. No. Sit down so that when you're talking to that person who's not going to, his eyes or her eyes are going to glaze over when you get past the 8th bullet point, and say why. And for any issue, if you say we ought to trim back the regulations that make it hard to build housing if we want more housing, if you want to, you know, any change you want, figure out what the primary, and if you don't know what they are, the internet is a great tool. You go on and do a keyword search or a phrase that has to do with whatever issue it is, Second Amendment or anything else, and boil it down to the essence. Because if you can make a short, simple argument, it's far more persuasive. And for you, it'll be an intellectual exercise of saying, what are those 4 points? And maybe you'll even decide, I had 5, but that was just window dressing. I'm going to go with these 4. And it will make you better able to persuade people. And when they hear those, to back up what Glenn was saying, you know the late foodie guy, Anthony Bourdain, okay? Sad that he took his own life. I can't imagine. I hate the idea of suicide. I hate legalized suicide. But one of the things he did a few years before he took his own life was Ted Nugent challenged him, said, come down to Texas, go shooting with us, we'll eat what we shoot. And he was a tried and true anti-gunner, Bourdain was. went down to Texas, went hunting with Ted, killed some animals, barbecued them up, had them for dinner, and he had a ball. And he flipped. And remember, for you or one of your friends to flip is not that, it doesn't have that big consequence. But for somebody like Bourdain, he realized if I flip on this issue and say, this was fun, it was enjoyable, it was good, that there are a whole bunch of people who immediately turned off the channel from him, said, I don't want anything to do with that guy. They're not very broad-minded. They all talk about tolerance, but when it comes to intellectual tolerance, they don't do it. But he flipped completely based on one experience, just like what Glen described.
I was just going to make a point real quick. He said to make it quick. As governor, I've already said that I would veto any tax increase, but I would also make sure that any bill that messes with the First Amendment or the Second Amendment, absolutely not, cannot have that signed into law. I would veto that in a heartbeat.
Thank you so much. My name is Brian Barnes. I am with Whatcom Open Carry. We are on Facebook, guys. I really am a single issue voter. Lots of things catch my eye, but that one thing is close to me. I want to love President Trump. I listened to him say the assault on the Second Amendment is over, and I literally leapt to my feet and cheered. Unfortunately, the guy that I love, everything else he's doing, he's been terrible with gun rights. How do we get the right track?
Okay, let me ask you a question in aid of an objection, as the lawyers like to say. What do you want him to do? I want nationwide concealed carry, arrest, prosecute for starters. You want that? Is that one of the things? And you know enough about the way our government works. What does that take? It takes a bill passed by the House, which Paul Ryan decided to sit on for whatever reason, because he's a loser rhino, and it takes passage in the Senate. So I wish the president could do that. I do not wish for him to do laws the way Obama tried to do laws, which is I can sign a piece of paper and it becomes a law. So if you're frustrated with him, I'm not frustrated with him, I'm frustrated with the system because he can't change that on his own. He has no power to change it on his own.
I have to say, one of the few times I'm getting an naysayer, like on your program, he signed an executive order that was very impactful. I don't really care
the
about
bump stocks. Is it the bump stock?
But the bump stock ban has really affected everything else that's related to firearms, accessories, magazines, what have you. He's gone on television and supported extreme risk protection orders, these red flag laws. He said he likes them. He's gone on and said, I don't like suppressors. All the things that we need, he's going on. I don't expect him to pass a law. He can't. But at least he can get behind us and say, no, I support suppressors. I support the right.
And I've said he's wrong on red flag laws. They are blatantly unconstitutional. You don't even have to be a lawyer to know that no due process means it ain't constitutional in America. So I agree with you there. And I promised my audience anytime I disagreed with the man, even though I supported him, I don't think I'll ever meet a politician where I agree with every single thing he does. You want to get in on this or not?
The only thing I'm going to add is I remember, how many of you remember when Ronald Reagan signed the assault weapons ban? I mean, because I remember I was too young to buy it.
Bad gun laws in
California. I was devastated. I was devastated. I remember that. And I was incredibly happy when it was, repealed later on. And I remember when I went to work, I interned at the Second Amendment Foundation in 1992 when I was in college. And I remember we had surveys there that showed how many Americans own firearms or what their view of firearms were. And we were worried about it at the time because it didn't, we didn't have the numbers. And I'm going to tell you that if you statistically go back and look at the number of Americans that own firearms or had a positive view of the firearms in the early 90s compared to now, it's actually improving. There's more firearms that are owned, there's more familiarity with the freedoms. I mean, this group is used to talking about Second Amendment issues, but I remember going to gun groups back in the 90s talking about, and a lot of this was new. It was new language to people, certainly in a room this size. And what works, what succeeds, is changing the way your community views the issue and evangelizing, taking people out shooting, getting more clubs involved, being engaged, staying involved. And that changes, I think, over time a lot. We have to do the same thing on property rights. This is what changes things, is letting people know, being engaged and being involved, and then making sure there's a price to be paid for the politicians that decide they're going to dedicate themselves and take it away from us.
We've got the 2-minute warning. Go ahead. Question. Yes, sir.
Well, I want to thank you guys for stepping out of your comfort zone to come here and represent Congress, Fourth Corner, and our country that we live in, because this is what's going to affect.
Thank you for that. I work in downtown Portland. This is my comfort zone. Yes, ma'am. Stand up so we can hear you. Oh, if you don't mind.
Given your concerns about wellness aid in Bellingham and different things, one of the things that's interesting to me, I didn't come from Iowa, but I came from near the state.
Gotta speak up.
The surveillance, I'm wondering what you think about Bellingham. There's all this secession. In my opinion, the Second Amendment is there to support all the rest of them. The Fourth Amendment, I don't know who votes on the surveillance apparatus, but I think we talked about, targets, pick your target. Well, what if we're the targets? And the whole facial recognition thing, I frankly think I have been the target.
And that concludes our broadcast of this Whatcom County Forum. Starts for our First and Second Amendment rights, featuring Lars, Glen, Tim Hyman, and Craig.
Well, and which surveillance system? Because believe me, there are far more. She's asking about surveillance state and facial. But here's the thing to remember: everything you do in public is public. That's not Fourth Amendment. Okay. What I mean is, if the police officer pulls you over, he has to have a warrant to get in your trunk.
What about at each stoplight?
There's a camera. You're in public. You have no expectation of privacy. Well, I'm just telling you what the law is, and I'm just saying that the law is, if I'm walking down the street, I'm going to be captured by a whole lot more private security cameras than I am government. London actually has a huge number of government cameras, CCTV, and they use them on crime and everything else, but everything they're shooting is out in public. And you say, well, I don't want my picture taken. Well, in America, I can take your picture in public. Now, if I say something untrue about you, you can sue me. If I invade your privacy, you can sue me for that. But taking pictures in public is not illegal. I'll get, Tim may disagree with me, but it is, it's legal.
It's just 20 seconds. One of my proudest achievements was working with activists here in Bellingham to get rid of those red light ticketing cameras, which I think are horrible. That you would have a private corporations profiting off of law breaking and somehow incentivizing people to be able to break the law so that the government and this corporation makes more money. That whole concept of red light ticketing cameras is so corrupting, and it's something that I'm just very proud that the people of Bellingham, 65% of very, very liberal Bellingham, said absolutely no to that. So anyway, thank you.
Common threads in the Fourth Corner. Thank you for being here. We're off the air now. These guys can stay up here until 10 or 11 if they want and answer your questions. But we really appreciate being here, and thanks so much, and let's give them a round of applause.
So we're here in Meridian. We're here for a Whatcom County First and Second Amendment event, and I'm here with Jennifer Sefcik, and she is a good friend, and I'll tell you why, because she is running for state representative, and she is hoping to represent Whatcom County in the 42nd Legislative District here, and actually fill the seat that I filled for 8 years down in the legislature. Jennifer, thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for helping just build the seats here. That was great. What was your initial thoughts when you came here? You show up. This auditorium is absolutely packed. What are your thoughts?
There was a lot of energy in this room tonight, and you can tell that the people are fed up with what's going on in Olympia and fed up with what's happening with our rights being impaired many times. And it's just kind of crazy town right now in Olympia. So it was great to hear some ways at the top and some real things that we can do to make a difference. And it's good for people to be educated and informed and be able to feel empowered by their knowledge.
So, what were some of the big takeaways? We saw your First Amendment issues, some of the things that were covered tonight. What did you find that really resonated with you, or you feel will resonate with people of the 42nd District?
First Amendment rights. Well, we often refer to some of the things that are really bothering people at Western Washington University because free speech is not something that happens on college campuses, and I think the people in the 42nd are also bullied into silence, I think, about their views and are tired of that. And you can sense that rumbling and that feeling of our president has empowered us to be able to speak up and to talk about our values, that they are the values that make America great and prosperous. And so people are ready to speak out.
So on Second Amendment issues, those are things that are happening. There's a lot of bad stuff that's happening here in Whatcom County and Washington State with regards to Second Amendment. What was some of the takeaways you saw tonight?
Well, it's nice to hear people discussing it, and I think you can just feel the energy in the room that people are frustrated, and so being able to know how we can talk to our neighbors, our friends, to engage people, to know what our talking points are, to know how we can actually just create a dialogue with people, our neighbors, our friends, and people in our circle, so that they can be more engaged as we're more engaged, and just create that synergy that comes from it.
Well, great. Well, I appreciate you taking a little bit of time to talk with us here, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Mr. Tim Hyman, I appreciate you being here.
Too disreputable.
Too disreputable. Okay, well, Mr. Hyman, appreciate your being here and understand that you're taking on some great aspirations for making changes at the top executive level here in our state of Washington. So good luck to you on that.
Yes.
And I, of course, like many people, know your name from so many different things over the last 20 years that you expressed during your event tonight. What is going to be your number one goal when you're in office? If that it comes to be your reality, what's the first thing you're going to do in your first 10 days, 20 days, month? I mean, what's that picture look like? Because I know a lot of people have big promises.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that yours can't be made, but then but you got to have realistic steps to do it. And so what are those changes you're going to see?
Well, I think that one of the biggest things that I've recognized is it seems like it's all about Seattle. We have a Seattle legislature, we have a Seattle Supreme Court, we have a Seattle governor. And I think that it's all oriented around Seattle. And I think we should have at least one branch of government that represents everybody else. And so what I think I would do most importantly is anytime they raise taxes, I would make sure that I would veto it. Anytime they attack the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, I would veto it. The voters of this state do not need 500 laws passing a Democrat-controlled legislature every single year. I think a lot of us are simply saying, leave us alone. Don't raise our taxes all the time. Don't attack our basic fundamental rights. That is one thing that I think a governor can do because the governor has the power of the veto. And that's something that you could absolutely promise. I got asked the question, how are you going to get along with these guys? None of them like you down there. And I said, they don't have to like me for me to veto their bills.
Very true. Now, one of the things I know that I hear from a lot of our folks in the law enforcement community is there's so many laws on the books with regards to gun rights, gun management, how you're going to carry it, where you can carry it, who can carry it, when, all those fun things.
Yeah.
There's so many things they can't enforce now because it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
And yet, as far as actual crime goes, the laws that have been on the books for like 20 years plus already resolve most of those issues. Is there any efforts that you think you could take to repeal some of those laws, or what steps might you think about there?
Well, there's no doubt that many of these things are the discretion of law enforcement. And already law enforcement is saying we cannot comply with all this stuff. They literally have this yearly background check, which is completely impossible. We're supposed to keep track of the healthcare records of all sorts of individuals in the state. They just simply can't do it. The only point I'm making is that right now we have Bob Ferguson and Jay Inslee have zero respect for our constitutional rights. They are wanting to sign every single bill that they can get their hands on that basically infringes on our rights. And I would be somebody that would make sure that the legislature, the Supreme Court, I would make sure that at least one branch of government is not infringing on our rights.
Okay, fantastic. What other parting words would you have for anybody that wasn't able to be here tonight, and they're going to get this little short interview that you and I are having right right now, what are some steps they can take to, one, support you and change the community as well?
Well, obviously, the first thing I would ask people to do is support and go to my website. It's tim4gov.com. That's tim4gov.com. It really talks about all the various things that I want to be able to accomplish, but it really is about the taxpayer. I think the average taxpayer is the least represented individual in our political system, and unfortunately, we have Jay Inslee right now, for the last 8 years, has raised your taxes 29 different times, despite the fact that he promised he would never raise taxes. Where I, over the last 20 years, thanks to the voters supporting these initiatives, have saved the taxpayers $43 billion. So the choice is simple. You have somebody that's raised your taxes $50 billion 29 times, and over here you've got somebody that's fought for you for 20 years. So it's tim4gov.com, Tim, the number 4, gov.com. And it's a knockdown, drag-out fight from now till November. People can support me anytime they want, but at the end of the day, by this November, I want to make sure that the voters have a choice between a tax raiser and a tax cutter.
Love it.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it.
Safe travels back home.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Bottom line, hey, for the folks out here on camera,
Sure.
tell them your name, a little bit about yourself real quick.
Okay. Yeah, my name's Glen Morgan, and I have founded We the Governed, which is a WeTheGoverned.com, which is a website and a YouTube channel focused on exposing government corruption and abuses of government in all over Washington State.
Fantastic. Now, before you spoke tonight at this event, I wasn't familiar with you.
Okay.
I was familiar with some of the issues you talked about.
Sure.
Which was it's fantastic to hear some of the background of how those came to the forefront. And
Right.
we got to learn about it. What drove your passion to even start investigating and enlightening people about the issues that you represent?
What really focused me on getting involved again was just having my own piece of property and getting hassled originally by code enforcement where I live in Thurston County. And then I ran for office. I was interested in the assessor's office of all things, not the most exciting position, but I was concerned about problems I found there. And when I lost that race, which was kind of the best thing that happened to me, actually, I really had learned a lot about local Thurston County government, and I went to work for the Freedom Foundation, and that's when I was really engaged in property rights. I had doorbell thousands of homes, and I knew how many problems there were, and that really just one thing led to another, and when the Freedom Foundation shut down their property rights division, I went off on my own and decided I would do the same thing I was doing, just exposing government and confronting them and teaching others how to be activists.
Very good.
That's what I've been doing.
Well, which teaches a lot of value. So, as somebody who owns their own business, if I am not managing my funds very well,
right,
I feel that impact on my household budget eventually, right?
Right.
So I'm incentivized to really make good use of my household funds, my business funds, because there's that trickle down.
Right.
How do we make government more accountable? You presented some different issues with abuse at Western Washington University, amongst others.
Right.
How can we take steps as ordinary citizens to help further that message and hold those agencies accountable?
And that's a good question. So one of the things I would do is try to shrink government a lot as far as the spectrum and scope of what government is, what we think of government doing. Because it's much easier to manage government, and it's much harder for it to be as corrupt as it is now, the smaller and more focused and dedicated that it is. So we want government to run a justice system, that we want to have jails that work and courtrooms that function and an independent judiciary, and we believe law enforcement is better for stability in the community, right? There's some basic core functions of government that generally as a community we agree on. We don't need government telling us whether or not we have a plastic straw. We don't need government telling us whether our porch needs to be 16 inches high or 21 inches. You know, we don't need government to do all these other things that we have basically allowed government to do at our expense. And so if we got a lot of just core function of government focus, that would eliminate a lot of our problems. But what happens is the bigger government gets, it creates its own basically driving constituency that wants more and more money. And the bureaucracy exists to perpetuate itself. And so it's there to promote its own interests, not ours. It's not the common good, it's their own interests. They don't care whether or not they hurt the community. They just want to make sure their budget grows, they get more grants, whatever their goal is. It's usually all about money and power. And so what we have to do is just constrain that. And the first thing to do is expose the truth. A lot of people aren't necessarily aware of what's happening in their community, in their city, or their county, or even state. They really don't have any idea. Even if they're kind of familiar with what's going on nationally, they have no idea what's going on locally. And locally is where you can make a difference. And so I usually try to encourage people to get involved locally. You can get involved in other things later, but get involved locally. That's the biggest impact in your life. And so That's where I think, and most of my time is in activism. But the end goal is to make it so we keep more of our money because we spend it better than they do. Or at least we spend it the way we want to. And also, and the only way you do that is you shrink the area that government's engaged in. You get them back to like these narrow, focused, critical things. The core issues the government should be in charge of, not this wide laundry list of things that they want to simply acquire as a way to justify their budgets.
Very true. And you spoke quite a bit earlier about some of the homeless issues.
Right.
And I believe I heard a number from 2018, about this time of year last year.
Yeah.
In Seattle. If I heard right, it's somewhere around $100,000 per transit individual that was in the city.
Yeah, and I think that number's probably gone up now, but I know it was over $1 billion that they spend just in the greater Seattle area, just on homeless problems. And so when you spend that much money, you create homeless industrial complex. That's what it is. It's a self-feeding ecosystem feeding on grants and our tax dollars, and they do not want to solve the problem. They want the problem to be worse.
Yeah, and it seems like it's only gotten worse in my view. I mean, you take a few blocks away from the stadiums, you're driving down the freeway, whether it be the express lane or the main thoroughfare, and my kids, they
Green
say,
Lake, I mean, anywhere you go. Yeah.
Even the city of Bellingham.
Oh, right.
So, I used to be able to park in
Olympia.
city business right behind.
Yeah.
One day, here about a year ago, I pulled up behind, and there's nothing going on there, or no place to park, I should say.
Right.
There was a fence, and I thought it was for construction. I looked, no, they turned it into a homeless camp
Yeah.
right behind the city hall.
Right.
I don't think that's the case now. I think there was enough complaints, but that's same thing when I'm down in Seattle. I go to the King County facilities
In Olympia and Vancouver and Everett. I mean, this is happening all over Washington State.
How do we go about getting the state to clear that up? I mean, you mentioned something earlier about filing complaints about water issues and violations of code from the public property standpoint. Can you describe that process just a little bit for?
Yeah, and so the one thing I would try to do is when you want to focus on these homeless camps and you want fewer drug addict or homeless camps around, number one, you do have to enforce some laws, some basically public safety laws. There has to be some penalty. If you and I were driving down the freeway today and we decided to take the garbage in our car and throw it out the window, we'd be pulled over and given a ticket for that. And most of us wouldn't dispute the righteousness of that ticket because that's poor behavior, that's bad for the community, and it's just a terrible thing to do. I mean, since at least the 70s in this country, nobody has accepted the ability to just
there's signs all over the place.
Right, you will be fine. But instead now, we've decided to give this group of people and say, you can dump toxic waste, including illegal substances and needles, and stick them in our parks, dump them in our waterways, pollute salmon streams with no penalties. That is irrational. It defies logic. It doesn't make any sense. And so the core issue with most homelessness is drug addiction. It's drug and alcohol addiction. That is the most common, second most common issue is related to mental health. And we're not attempting to deal with either of those issues. We're not helping them get into treatment programs if they're drug addicts at all. We don't help them. They say they do, but they don't. What they do is they hand out free needles to the naval. They give them free Wi-Fi, free tents, free food, free clothing. It's free propane. I mean, it's
so
just
you just
endless.
sustain them in that.
So that you've made it so that here's my compassion to you. I will let you kill yourself. I will give you the tools to make sure that you can kill yourself, and you'll be comfortable in doing it.
It's a good way to verbalize.
Yeah, and how is that compassion? That's not compassion. And the other thing is dealing with the mental health issue. So in our state, we have chosen to destroy our mental health system. There's a variety of reasons what they've done. I mean, Western State Hospital, which is our leading mental health facility, has been run so poorly and wasted so many millions of dollars that the federal government won't even certify it anymore. They lost certification. It's a complete mess, and we aren't finding ways to compassionately address people who actually have mental health issues and need to have them either managed or possibly cured. I mean, there's some things you can't really cure, but some things you can just manage so at least they have a comfortable life and they're not out on the streets. Nobody's going to consider living on the streets, shooting yourself up, or assaulting people, or dumping garbage somewhere, or defecating from the courthouse as like optimal lifestyle choice. That's not a lifestyle choice.
Yeah, it's not what you visualize doing when you grow up.
No, nobody does. And so what we really need to do is just give these people an opportunity through a treatment program that actually makes sense. And now that might be, there's plenty of nonprofit groups that are set up to do some of that. But what we found is that a lot of these so-called homeless, groups are really just set up to extract the cash out of the grant. There's no transparency in how they spend the money. nobody knows who's actually getting paid or where the money goes. And so there are some transparency issues I think we could use to fix a few of the more egregious abuses. But part of it's just at the beginning is just enforce the law. You can't let people just go out and willfully damage and destroy themselves and everyone around them just because you want to pretend like that's compassionate. That's not compassionate. So, and I think if you did that, it'd be amazing. People would be amazed how quickly you can fix things. I lived in New York City before Giuliani was there. I was a college student. And I remember my sophomore year, 2,300 people were murdered within 10 miles of my dorm room. And I just remember thinking that the misery that I saw around me was just what a big city would be like. And everybody was resigned to that. That's what it was like. And I remember bringing Giuliani to campus to speak my senior year, listening to him speak. And I remember thinking, there's no way this guy can be elected, but I liked what he had to say. And he talked about this, the broken windows theory, James Q. Wilson's approach, quality of life issues, focusing on the little things so that the big things can be fixed as well. I didn't think that was possible. I thought it was a pipe dream. And he got elected, despite what I already left the city by that point. And to watch that murder rate go from 2,200, 2,100 the next year, when they celebrated it, dropping 100, and then to drop down to 400 under Giuliani, along with all the other crimes and the problems. I mean, there's tens of thousands of people alive today because of that man and the program that he implemented there. It can't be denied. That's a mathematical fact. And so I think that there's some evidence that even in the worst cities, even cities run horribly, you can come in and fix it. This isn't necessary. We don't have to live like this. We don't have to take Seattle, which can be a good city.
It was a beautiful city.
You don't have to just turn it. Yeah, you don't have to turn it into a dump.
No more.
Yeah, I mean, the Seattle City Council right now, the Democratic Party wants to turn Seattle into a dump. It's bizarre. It defies common sense. But the special interest establishment around them wants that $1 billion of grant money, and so they don't care if they're destroying everybody else's life. Everybody, that's all it is. Freedom, Republic need, and that is the City Council in a nutshell. That is their personal ruling ideology. That's what we have to expose, and that's what we have to confront.
Fantastic. Well, one last question for you. How can folks that are interested in learning more from you, you mentioned your organization initially, give one more last shout out to how to reach out to you, how to get involved, how to support some of your efforts?
Okay. Anybody can go to WeTheGovern.com, just like it's spelled. You can look it up. I have a YouTube channel and a website, both. Please go there, follow me, subscribe. If you like what I'm doing, you can support me. I survive entirely on the charity and support of others like you. But go there and see what you think. If you like what I'm doing, and if you want to learn how to do that yourself, I am here to teach people and encourage them to do the same thing. It's not about me. It's about teaching more people to do this and being involved and engaged in their local communities.
Fantastic. Well, Mr. Morgan, thank you for your time.
Hey, thank you. All right, thank you.
Have a safe travel.
Yeah.